Are we living in the end times? A lot of people seem to think so. And I've thought a lot about prophecy because I grew up very religious. So I have some thoughts on this, on both why prophecies like this are so compelling and why we probably should pay them a little less heed than most people do. Although we shouldn't ignore them entirely because they do impact the world simply by virtue of people believing in them. There's an example from ancient history of a king of a country called Lydia, that was rivals with the Persian Empire. And the king, well, he's Greek, he's sort of in the Greek speaking world, and he goes to the oracle at Delphi, who is this person who's supposed to commune with the gods, and asks the oracle, should I go to war against Persia? And the oracle, according to the story, which is very old and there's not many sources, so it may be apocryphal, but I think it's illustrative nonetheless. The oracle says something like, well, if you go to war against Persia, a great empire will be destroyed. And so the king, he thinks this is great news because Persia is a great empire, goes to war against Persia, and he is utterly destroyed. And all the Greeks are like, ah, oh, that oracle, she was so right because the king of Lydia was destroyed, and that's a great empire. Well, if you think about this, it should be obvious why this is a bit silly. Because no matter what happened, the Greeks would have been able to say, oh, the oracle was right. And in that sense, the oracle really didn't say anything. And a lot of successful prophecies or prophesiers have this character. These people that kind of seem like Nostradamuses that are predicting so many things. If you actually look at their track record of predicting the future, it either is not that good or simply very vague, to the point that you wouldn't really be able to rely on their prophecies at all. This is one reason why people who deeply believe in prophecies, whether from astrology or ancient religions or what have you, oftentimes feel supremely confident and yet don't actually seem to know the future better than anyone else. So that's key number one, is prophecies are vague, and so it can seem like they're fulfilled even if the opposite thing happened than you thought would happen. The second component of prophecies is that there are many of them. And what this means is that when one thing happens that's the opposite of one prophecy, well, another prophecy might take its place. There's an example in the Judeo-Christian tradition. So the Jews believed very deeply that a Messiah was going to save them from the Romans. And they rebelled multiple times, serious rebellions, huge mobilizations. Essentially, the Romans had to mostly destroy Judea in order to crush them. And these prophecies about the Messiah coming and saving the Jews, well, it didn't seem like they'd been fulfilled, but fortunately, there was another tradition who had believed in a Messiah that had not saved the Jews, and so they'd sort of already come pre-prepared with some rationalizations for this. Well, actually, the Messiah wasn't physical, it was spiritual. He already came, and all this destruction is happening because you didn't believe in him. And to the ancient world, this seemed very compelling. But it's worth noting that if you make a bunch of prophecies about a bunch of different things, one of them is going to be true, but that doesn't mean that everything that happens thereafter is going to be according to that tradition. They just maybe got lucky this time. And so the third thing that's true about prophecies is that they provide a sense of certainty. And this is the psychological aspect. They provide a sense of certainty in a world that is very uncertain. And frequently this uncertainty is paralyzing. This is one of the benefits of Zen Buddhism, actually, is they really emphasize this kind of Nike slogan of just do it, stop overthinking. And for many people, this actually is beneficial. So even if a prophecy isn't necessarily true, sometimes it is helpful to simply feel like you know what's going on and start acting. Because if you don't, well, that often is the worst of all worlds. But this doesn't mean that the people are right about what's going to happen. And honestly, you can get a similar benefit simply by saying, I'm going to go out and do something today, even if it's not perfect. But for many people, having that extra sense of certainty is helpful and psychologically beneficial, which is why people want to believe in this. And then the fourth aspect is that many successful prophecies are sort of self-fulfilling. There's an example of this from the ancient Roman world, where there was a prophecy that if the flames of the sacred flames went out, then the city would fall. And sure enough, the sacred flames did go out, and shortly thereafter, Rome fell to the barbarians. But again, if you think about this prophecy, it's a little bit self-fulfilling. Once people believe in this prophecy, then as long as Rome is essentially able to do so, they will keep the flame alive. And the fact that they let the flame go out was a sign of the fact that Rome was already having serious problems and had therefore embraced another tradition which justified and explained suffering in the context of a broader plan. It justified, in a sense, decay and disaster because this was just part of a purification process. And again, this is a sign of things already breaking down. And many prophecies today, I mean, we're watching in the Iran war, many of the individual people in the Iran war are explaining at least some of the things they're doing in the context of Jewish or Christian or Muslim prophecies about the end times. And this is, I believe, impacting behavior. There are secular reasons for what's going on, just real power, realpolitik, media, manipulation reasons to explain what's going on. But this religious aspect also is playing a role in the rationalizations. But if you look at any of these prophecies that people are, whether it's Pete Hegseth or Netanyahu or any of these people, the theocratic Islamic Republic, believe in and are using to justify how they believe that God is on their side and will support them, these are prophecies that people have believed were imminent for 2,000 years. These are prophecies that people have, or depending on the prophecy, it might be, it's less than or just over 1,000 years or something. But the fact is, these prophecies have been around together and forever, and you kind of have to ask yourself, what would be the point of that? What would be the point of making this very vague prophecy that always seems like it's coming true and yet never does for 1,000 years? Why would a loving God intentionally confuse everyone who believes in him? It seems a bit out of character. And yet, that very reason, the fact that these prophecies are vague, that they can always seem to be happening, is part of the power of those traditions. Because whenever anything goes wrong, people are looking for certainty, and then they turn to these traditions that seem to offer it. But in the end, I believe that certainty is mostly false. Incidentally, this is the same reason that I struggle to really believe that astrology is that meaningful. Again, I think it might be meaningful in the sense that sometimes if you're confused, it does make sense to simply move forward with something. And so some extra sense of certainty can be helpful and certainly psychologically beneficial, even if it's in the end sort of false. But in terms of the actual predictions, I think that many of the predictions are honestly vague enough. The truth is that people are multifaceted and life is multifaceted. And if you're looking for an example of times when you've been decisive, because that's what your star sign says, you'll find it there. If you're looking for signs in which you've been inquisitive or caring or whatever else your star sign says, you'll find it in there even if you're Genghis Khan. That everybody has examples of being that way, because life is complex. And what this simplified sort of structure does that says you are this way, this is how you should act, well, if you're looking for confirmation bias of that, you'll always be able to find it. But that doesn't mean that your star sign applied to you any more than any other star sign. And in fact, there are studies on this, that if you tell someone the wrong horoscope, they are just as convinced it's true or not as if you give someone the right horoscope. People basically view it the same way. Because again, if you are told you are going to act a certain way, that increases the odds both that you do act that way and that you see examples of yourself acting that way, even if you didn't change your behavior at all. So I hope this is helpful to those who are sort of parsing through the news and seeing examples of all these prophecies that seem to be coming true, because it's a little bit like mental crack. It feels so good to believe in that certainty, but ultimately it might not get you exactly where you want to go.